students. We are continuing with chapter 3, How Many Squares? In the previous video, you learned how to find the area of various shapes. Let's move a step ahead. Today we will be learning how to find the approximate area of irregular shapes. Let me make the meaning of term approximate clear here itself. Approximate means close to actual but not accurate or exact. Now, before we learn this new concept, let's learn the meaning of regular and irregular shapes. Regular shapes are those shapes which have equal sides and equal inside or interior angles. So such shapes are called regular shapes. Now you might be thinking, what is inside or interior angles? Just look at this triangle, everyone. The angles that I am marking now, they are the interior angles of this triangle. So these three are the interior angles. So along with the three sides, these interior angles are also equal in a regular shape. Clear? So, if we talk about this triangle only, you can call it a regular triangle or an equilateral triangle. This is a regular octagon. This is a regular pentagon. And the last one is a regular quadrilateral, or in other words, you can say it a square. Let's learn the meaning of irregular shapes now. Irregular shapes are simply the opposite of regular shapes. The shapes which do not have equal sides or equal angles are called irregular shapes. Look at this triangle, the first example itself. The sides are also not equal and the internal angles or the interior angles are also different. They are not of the same measure. Similarly, all these figures, they are irregular shapes. Now, let's learn about the rules to be applied for finding the approximate area of irregular shapes. Rule number 1. It states, count each whole or complete square covered by an irregular shape as one square. Okay? Now, look at this square grid, everybody. What do you observe? The square grid is made of small squares. And beside the square grid, it is mentioned each square has an area of 1 square centimeter. So let's find the approximate area of this irregular shape. So what do you see? We'll first count the whole squares. Look at the numbers mentioned within this irregular shape. The numbers are mentioned from 1 to 11. These numbers actually represent the whole squares covered by this irregular shape, everybody. And as we know, the area of one whole square is equal to 1 square centimeter. So the area covered by whole squares will be equal to 11 square centimeter. So this rule was for complete or whole squares only. Now let's learn the second rule. It says count each exactly half square covered by an irregular shape as half only. Now, do you see? In three parts of this figure, I have written half, half and half. Just observe beta. This side here is dividing this square into two equal parts. So each part here represents half. Similarly, this side divides this square into two equal parts. So this part is what? Half. Same is the case with this slanting line. This slanting line is also dividing this square into two equal parts. So that is why it is again half. And as you all know that two halves make one whole. So three halves, the third one would make it 1.5 whole squares. So let's move to rule number 3. Count each more than half square covered by an irregular shape as one square only. Look at these three parts of the figure, everyone. Here I have written 1. Just observe the part which is within this irregular shape. It is not exactly one whole square, but it is more than half. So beta, the rule says that such more than half squares should be counted as one whole. So 1, 2 and 3. So these three more than half squares would be equal to 3 whole squares. Now let's move to the last rule, which is rule 4. Ignore or don't count less than half squares covered by an irregular shape. Just look at the parts which are marked with a cross. If we observe closely, children, here the part which is within this irregular shape is less than half in all the cases. So according to the rule, such squares should not be counted. These squares should not be counted. So we'll ignore them. So let's find the approximate area now. Whole squares is equal to 11. The total of 3 half squares is equal to 1.5. That makes it 12.5 whole squares. Now, the total of 3 more than half squares is equal to 3. So, 12.5 plus 3 gives us the approximate area as 15.5 square centimeter. I hope I have made myself clear to everyone. So let's do an exercise now. Find the area of the given figures. Each square here has an area of 1 square centimeter. This is figure 1, everybody. So let's count the whole squares first. In this line, if we see, there are 3 whole squares. 1, 2 and 3. There is no other whole square in this line or in the previous one. Let's check the next line. So there is one more whole square here. So how many whole squares do we have? We have 4 whole squares. Let's count exactly half squares now. Do we have any half square, children? Exactly half square? No. If we look at the topmost part, in all the cases it is less than half. So we'll have to ignore. This is more than half. This is again less than half. This is more than half, more than half, more than half. These two are less than half. So there is no exactly half square here. So we have written 0. Now let's count the more than half squares. Observe, this is the first more than half square. Let's see the second one. This is the second more than half square. Now, let's look at the third one. This is the third more than half square. Similarly, we have this as the fourth one and this as, which one? This as the fifth one, children. So, how many more than half squares do we have? 5 more than half squares, which each one of these would be counted as one whole square. So it would be equal to 5 whole squares, everybody. Now less than half squares are required to be ignored. So we'll not count here. So the approximate area of this shape will be equal to 4 plus 5, which is equal to 9. The area of this shape is approximately 9 square centimeter. Now let's move to the next shape. This is the next shape. Let's mark the whole squares first of all. In this row, we have just one whole square. But in the next one, we have 3 more. So how many whole squares do we have, children? We have 4 whole squares. Clear? Now we move to exactly half squares. And this part, according to me, maybe you don't find it exactly half, but what I feel is, if I include this part along with little on this side, so what do we get? We get half more, everyone. So this, according to me, is exactly half. In rest of the cases, I feel they are either more than half or they are less than half. So how many half squares? We have only one half square, which is equal to 0.5 whole square. Clear? Now let's count more than half squares. In this row, first of all, this is the first one. This is the second one. This is the third one. This is the fourth one. This is fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, and this is the last, which is ninth. So how many more than half squares do we have? We have 9 more than half squares, which will be equal to 9 whole squares. Clear? Now these parts, if we see, all these, they are less than half. So we will ignore them. We will not count these parts as they are less than half. And less than half is required to be ignored. So the approximate area is equal to 13.5 square centimeter. Now we move to the last figure, children. The last figure is this. Let's mark the whole squares first of all. So these two are the only whole squares here, children. Now what are we going to do? We'll find exactly half squares. So 1, and this is the second half square. So the 2 half squares will be equal to how many whole squares? Only 1, my dear children. Clear? Now let's mark the more than half squares. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So these were the 7 more than half squares, which would be equal to 7 whole squares. Now, these parts, this one, this is little less than half, so I've ignored it, bache. Here also, this is less than half, this also is less than half, this as well as this is less than half. So, I have ignored all these. So, children, the approximate area of this shape will be 2 plus 1 is 3. 3 plus 7 is equal to 10 whole squares. That means 10 square centimeter. I hope you all have understood this concept. Remember, children, everybody's answer would vary a bit. It would be different from the other child, maybe by half square or maybe by 1 or 1.5 square, plus minus 1 or 1.5 squares on both the sides. Clear? But we are just finding the approximate area, not the exact area. So you all know what is approximate? Approximate means not the actual area but very close to the actual one. So children, that's all for today. Bye-bye. I'll take leave of you now, but don't forget to practice this concept at home. Take care.